So welcome to the strangely named using attachment transform rule. Sounds boring. It's called that just because it comes up well on Google search for our sales page, but what we're doing is using a new API and more importantly creating an impact blast. Look at that. Pretty cool. Okay, see you in the video. So let's work on this impact blast then. I'm going to use the same particle effect as the launch blast. So I'm just going to duplicate it and just call it impact blast. It's going to be very similar to that. Of course, all the dependencies of the impact blast will already be here because it has the same dependencies as the launch blast. So if I save that impact blast and go into it, it should work. We should have no problems with it. And if we look at the reference viewer now, after having saved it, you'll see it's picked up all of these references. So we're reusing these things, which is good. Okay, cool. So impact blast, what's that going to look like then? Well, it's up to you to customize it how you want. I'm not going to go through that too much. But before we do that, let's just get it working from a coding point of view so we can see it in situ rather than in isolation. So what do we want? We want on our projectile a new type of component called an impact blast, and that's almost identical to the launch blast. So I'm not going to insult you by asking you to do it. It's so much like the launch blast that we literally copy this stuff, call it impact blast in two different places. Actually over here as well, impact blast for the name. And of course we need to declare impact blast, which I'll go do in the header file right now. It's going to be just like a launch blast. Same detail, so it's literally really simple. The only difference is with the impact blast, of course, is that we don't want it to be activated at the start. So with the launch blast, we have not said auto-activate is false, so it is activated by default, and that's right, because we spawn the projectile into the world, and it starts off with that particle effect. But what we're going to want with the impact blast is we want it to be auto-activate false. We don't want it to be activated at the start. All right. The other thing about this class here is that we say primary actor B can ever tick equals true. The projectile actually doesn't need to tick, so we can say false here, because if you look down, you'll see that we don't use the tick here at all. I'll leave the begin play in case we need it, but that's it. By the way, while we're talking about auto-activate, you see that the projectile movement does not activate. That's correct as well. We don't want the projectile to move until we actually call the launch projectile method. Okay, so that's all working fine. Let me go ahead and make sure that impact blast is in the header file because it's not saying that it is, and of course it isn't because I just copied. Okay, so impact blast goes there. These lines get copied, launch blast change for impact blast, and we make it non-auto-activating. Let's go ahead and see if that compiles. And when it does compile, or if it does compile, what we should see is, of course, inside the projectile blueprint, we should see on the left-hand side a launch blast and a impact blast next to each other. Also, we want to be attaching to root component. Yeah, we did that by default because I just copied. I said, let's have the same paradigm as the launch blast. So copying code. So what have I done? I've done a boo-boo somewhere. The function is deprecated. Use attach to component instead. Update your code. Okay, on projectile 19, it doesn't like attach to root component and attach to component. It's funny that it didn't complain about that before. They're just warnings here. And then we have a linker error. Okay, so look, what's happening here is quite interesting. We would have had these warnings before, but we weren't looking at them. Okay, so I'm not going to fix them. We'll come back to them. Let's just make a note in the code that we need to do, update to attach, well, update to new API. Okay, so that we've actioned this in that we've put a to-do, but the thing is that the reason we have a failure of actual compilation here is because we have unresolved externals, which always means that we have or nearly always means we have a mismatch, a mismatch between the declaration of something in the header file and the implementation in the other file. And what that is actually is the tick. It's because I never took the tick out of the header file. So those errors can be a little bit strange. Now, let's go and compile again, because there's a useful learning in here, which is that when it compiles again, the compilation will succeed, probably now, hopefully, if I've done it right. The compilation will succeed, and we will miss those warnings. So I'm just going to make sure you're aware of how you can get to and check for those warnings. You see, compilation successful. It hasn't told us anything's wrong here. But if we go to Window, Developer Tools, and then Message Log, I think we should dock our message log here in future because look, if we come down here and have a look, we've got compiler log. Now let's read the compiler log. There you go. The warning is there against the compile log. And it's saying that we shouldn't use attach to, please use attach to component instead. Okay, well let's go and do that right away. But the point here, the general point is that a compilation succeeding does not mean there are no warnings, and warnings should still be fixed. I'm just going to try changing to attach to component, like that. I will just check the documentation for attach to component, at least the inline documentation here. I think that's going to work okay. I won't remove the to-do until it's working. Let's try recompiling. And this time, we'll keep an eye on the message log rather than the output log, on the compiler log here. And this will still tell us when here you go. It does not take one argument. Okay, so you can't just do a straight transposition of one to the other. We actually need to take a second to read that a lot more carefully and see what the deal is with regards to what it wants. So it wants a using component pointer, which I believe that the root component is, but it also wants an attachment transform rules. So let's look at what this second parameter is. It wants a fattachment transform rule. So it appears that this new attach to component method just wants us to be a little bit more explicit about how we attach. If you go to Google and search for that, you'll have fattachment transform rules. I've also linked to this in the course resources. And what we're going to want to do here is to provide a keep relative transform. What we're saying there is that we want the impact blast to go with the projectile, at least for now. We may decide to change that policy later, but that's where we're going to start for both in both cases. So if we look, sorry, I'm flicking all over the place. If we look at the documentation, it's just keep relative transform is what we want, okay? So it's a static. Right, let's go ahead and have a look at how that's going to work. So in the code, we are simply going to say fattachment transform rules, : take the static off it, keep relative transform, and that should do it. Let's do that for both. And by the same argument, I won't remove the to-do until it compiles without warnings. Let's go back and compile. So from now on, you've got this tool of the message log, an even better way to be compiling, because not only do you catch errors, but you catch warnings. Better than just looking at the output log. Okay, the compile's complete. We've got no issues at all. If we want to look at our output log at the bottom, that's also pretty normal. So that's all good news. All right, let's give ourselves some more room. I will just show you the code changes. I made a lot of changes in that lecture, just if this helps you. And then we'll move on to the next bit. So we stopped it ticking, and then we did this stuff that you can see in here. Removed the tick, but the bulk of it is just this green in there. Okay, in the header file, we simply declared and removed the tick function. Okay, cool. So that's a recap of where we are. We're about 8 minutes into the video, so we've got time for some more. Great. So now what we want to do is to actually customize this impact blast to be how we want it, and to activate it when we actually get a hit. So what I want you to do is revise a few lectures ago. I want you to register a component on hit event delegate. What a mouthful, but we did do it a few videos ago. Use the launch blast arrow deactivate method in order to turn off the launch blast, the one that's leaving the smoke trail, when the collider hits something. We turn off the launch blast. Add an impact blast particle effect to the projectile. We've already done most of that. We probably haven't actually wired up in the blueprint the impact blast. We've done most of it. Activate that on impact, and you activate it using a very similar line to the launch blast deactivate. I guess you can imagine what it is. And then share your explosion with the community. And I'll see you in a minute. Okay, welcome back. So the first thing I don't think we've done is gone into this impact blast and actually assigned the impact blast to the component. So that's done now. If we compile and play that, well, then it crashes. Let's just try again. No, I don't think there's any particular reason it would have crashed there. I don't think we've done any naughties, not protecting components. Again, my general policy is if it crashes once, don't worry. You might want to run the debugger now in case it crashes a second time. I'm not going to. I'm just going to reattach the impact blast, compile that, and you see it's absolutely fine. Let's just have a look. We have a launch blast and an impact blast doing basically the same thing, so you can't really tell. Looks like we've just got two particle effects on top of each other. Doesn't look a lot different. Okay, let's go to the code and think about what we're going to do. Several videos ago, we did an on-component hit event. So why don't we just go find that? On-component hit. And we can go to the entire project and go find that. Okay, so what we needed to do in begin play when we did this on the tank track is we needed to add a dynamic delegate. So, well, that's the first thing I found. Let's do that on begin play of the projectile. Let's just model what we've done before. It worked before. Let's do it again. Okay, let's keep going. So on component hit. Okay, so the next thing we need to know is where the on definition of the on hit event is inside this tank track. So there it is, on hit, and it's got this massive signature. So let's just go take it. I'm going to put after launch projectile. I'm going to put on hit like that. Put some squigglies, and the only thing you need to be aware of course, is changing from your projectile to your tank track to your projectile. Okay, let's keep going. If we've got an on hit here in the tank track.cpp, then we must have some declaration of that. So let's go see how we did that before. We made it a U function, and let's just copy that straight into the projectile. Let's think about the protection. It was private, so let's just try private again. And there's no reason for it to be anything but private either. It's a method, so I like it to go at the top. Don't know why, they just seem like they should go at the top. Doesn't matter at all. Okay, so hopefully that's it. We've just put an on hit here. We have defined it here, although we're not doing anything yet. I think what would probably make sense to do here is to go to the launch blast and deactivate it. So I gave you that in the slide, didn't I? I said launch blast, deactivate. So we're going to do that on hit as an indication that we have hit something. And let's see if that is working and if the collisions are actually happening. Let's compile. Again, I don't know why I've got rid of my message log, so I'm going to bring it back. Dock it down here. And start looking at the message log. The part of the message log you want is the compiler log there. You'll get nothing out of it until the compiler is finished. Oh, on component hit, undeclared identifier on line 33. And the problem here is that I'm trying to run onComponent hit or access onComponent hit on a projectile, which actually, if you think about it, is not a component at all. It is an actor. So what we need to do is we need to do the onComponent hit. We need to register that against the collision mesh onComponent hit. Okay? So that was the dark side of all that copying, was that obviously it didn't think about what we're doing with the onComponent hit, because we're not a component. We need to get into the scope of the component we're talking about. Let's see if that'll compile. UTankTrack is not a class or namespace, and the other dark side, of course, of the copying and pasting is I didn't change that UTankTrack to a projectile there. Now let's go ahead and compile again. So you can see that copying and pasting clearly saves you a load of time, but it also has, as I say, a darker side, which is that you end up bringing stuff in which can cause you some issues. So it's up to you how much copying and pasting you do versus writing original code. I thought I'd show you that approach. So it's compiled, which is great. Now let's just play the game. We're not really necessarily going to be able to see that. Yes, we can. We can see that particle effect has stopped. You can particularly see it if you temporarily get rid of the impact blast, just unassign it. We can just clear that here. Compile the blueprint, play the game, and then if we just go into the world with F8 and move over to this site of these cannonball things, you can see that there's no smoke coming out of them. They are deactivated now. Okay, so that is what's going on. They are deactivated. Those components on them are deactivated. You could click into, of course, the actual thing, and you could look at the launch blast, and then you could probably go into the details and even confirm that it's deactivated if it's exposed. Well, no, it's not. Whether it is actually activated right now is not exposed as a parameter, but you can see that it's not activated. So that process of deactivating it on landing, deactivating the launch blast on landing has worked, and it will no longer emit a launch trail. So the video's got quite long. I think what we need to do is stop there for the moment and just take track on how far we've got. What have you got? Add an impact blast to the projectile, activate it. No, we can do that. We can activate that impact blast in the last couple of minutes. Let's just do that. So back to the projectile blueprint, impact blast, reassign the particle system. I'm just going to do something to the particle system that makes it super obvious, like take the initial size of the fireball, plot just the initial size of the fireball on the graph, go and say, well, what's the size range? I'm going to zoom right out and just make it much bigger, like that. Actually, it's going to be easier just to look and say, well, these are uniform vectors. They have x, y, z, so let's just ramp up the maximum possible size and the minimum possible size of x in x, y, and z. It can be asymmetric for now. And what that should do is when we get an impact blast, whoa, there it is. So we're starting with the impact blast activated. We don't want that. We want to make sure that auto activate is turned off. Now, you go to the projectile, impact blast, we can search for auto activate, and it's on, it wants to be off. And it should have been made the default off in the C++. I thought we did that. So let's go and have a look. Where we add the impact blast, auto activate equals false. Ah, look, I've copied again. Wow. I am doing lots of copy and paste boo-boos right now. That is why the impact blast did not auto activate false. So let's just recompile. Now, when you do this recompilation, the setting that you have against this impact blast component, the fact I've said not auto-activate in Blueprint is still overriding what's happening in the C++. It's just that the little arrow will go away because it is now at the new default value. So let's just watch this, see what happens. It's nearly there. What we haven't done is reactivated this on impact. So where we see our on hit, we inactivate the launch blast and we activate the impact blast. Let's compile that. And it's pretty simple and meaningful, all this. I like it. I'm liking the way the code's coming together. So a few little mistakes and hiccups from me in this video, but I'm leaving those in because my general feedback from you guys is that that's better, it's more realistic, it's more live and uncut, it's more like the journey you guys are probably having, so hopefully you like that. Boom, look at that. That's enough for this video. Congratulations. I want you to snapshot your beautiful impacts and things and share them in the community, and I'll see you in the next video.